Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of the Culture Nerd Podcast. This week, I guess we're live again, and what we're going to do this time is we're going to talk about some new things that have actually come through the woodwork over the last week since our last interview. We're going to be talking about the brand new details that came out of the New York Times about what Netflix is planning to do going forward with how they make films and how this new mandate of theirs kind of puts everyone out of a job who makes certain types of films, including Zack Snyder. So we're going to talk about the details of this new mandate, what they're doing, what they're planning on doing, what it means, and what it actually could mean for people like Zack Snyder. We're also going to talk about Superman new casting. We got casting for Pa Kent and Ma Kent. We got a brand new look at David Cornsweet as Superman, coincidentally just out of some random commercial he was shooting. And we're also going to talk about X-Men 97, and last week's essentially it's a Red Wedding episode that completely changed the game. We're going to talk about why that episode was significant and what it actually means for the fandom, because a lot of people are expecting one thing and it doesn't sound like that one thing is going to happen. We're also going to talk about Fallout, because that is the big show that's been hitting the internet lately. There's been some weird controversy, surprisingly, not so surprisingly, from fans of the project, because they're upset about certain canon things that are and are not allegedly canon in their eyes, but the creators are saying otherwise. So we're going to talk about all of these things, and let's just get right to it. How you doing, buddy?
I thought Fallout 97 was all we were going to talk about. You told me that if I didn't watch it, you were going to ruin it. You were going to spoil it for me.
Yeah, I'm going to spoil it all for you.
We watched the whole thing over the last 3 days.
It's really good, right?
I enjoyed it. The wife enjoyed it. The fact that it didn't feel like a video game and was just learning this story as a television show, we both enjoyed it. I loved it a lot.
Before we jump into all the big shit, I want to talk about that in itself, because the reason why I personally loved the Fallout show was because it was, to me, that's how you do a proper adaptation of video games. You and I, we talked about how the Last of Us, even though it was amazingly critically received by everyone, people who actually played the game felt it was a little lackluster. And the reason why is because they did skip around a lot. They cut some stuff for budget. They cut some stuff for timing. And the problem when you have long-form games being adapted into a live-action medium is that the people who experience the game and have these fond memories of the game, most of the time, they're not going to be satisfied because things are cut out, things are cut down, things are removed. But what they did here with Amazon and Jonathan Nolan in particular, what they did here was they brought a story that not only set in the world of Fallout, but is actually canon to all of the games. And they actually put in a timeline saying, here's basically how it goes. Fallout 76, first game in the whole franchise. Then you go Fallout 1, 2, 3, New Vegas, and 4. And then you jump like 10 years into the new Fallout TV show. And they explicitly stated, because everyone was upset. They're like, oh, this show contradicts what happened in Fallout New Vegas, blah, blah, blah. But they said flat out, this show takes place 15 years after the ending of Fallout New Vegas. So yes, that game is still canon. And this is actually the first time Bethesda actually acknowledged that Fallout New Vegas is canon to the rest of the franchise, because coincidentally, the best game of the franchise, New Vegas, was not made by Bethesda. So that was kind of a big controversial point for games, but it's officially canon now.
In the show, while there is a mystery too that gets unraveled,
Yeah.
I'm happy that they didn't. I'm happy that they didn't hide anything.
Yeah.
Here are the underground people. Here are the mech suit people. Here is a ghoul.
Yeah.
This is a promise to the audience that we are going to see these things. And it also, I really like the way that it plays with tropes of Westerns, wherein as we see them enter into town and we see what that world is like, it does not go the way that I think it's going to go. It's a shootout at the OK Corral. And that's where the stakes are. And I was just so happy that all of these different groups are so true to themselves and the way that they do things. And I think it's a fun world that people now get to explore. And the fact that the video games all happened before this is great. It means that you can play those whenever you want to play them, but you can also just jump into the show.
Yeah, and it's such a cool thing. Because and that's what I said. Like, the reason why I loved this show was because it felt really accessible, and it also felt really faithful and true to the source material. Even so much as there was Easter eggs out the butt for this show with all the things that you could like. Oh, I know that. I know that. I know that. I know that.
But they were also paying homage to other science fiction TV shows and being like, yeah, that's the guy from Lost. You know he's here. We got it. But again, as a television viewer, the show is giving you like, hey, if you kind of like these things, you'll probably like this show. And I do.
And that was
I guarantee you. Okay, my father-in-law's calling me. We told him to watch Fallout last night. Sends me a picture. My sister-in-law sends me a picture of him watching the first episode at like 10 o'clock at night. I guarantee you I guarantee you probably watched it all day long.
Yeah. And here's a comment that I want to bring up real fast because this is exactly how I feel about the show. I wish they dropped it weekly, so higher viewership. Yes. You may think that maybe it was Amazon not too sure if a video game adaptation was going to be as successful as it was. But by dropping it all at once, you kind of followed the Netflix approach and you had what could have been an 8-week event to all at once. And
it's better this way because it's like a long movie.
Yeah, I mean, it really is.
Snyder really soon. The first 3 episodes kind of play like a movie, and you kind of don't want to stop. It does dip down again in the middle, but I think this was the right choice. You just get into this world, and then you want to spend more time in it. So now I got to figure out how do I play the old Fallouts.
Well, funny enough, the Fallouts 1 and 2 and Fallout Tactics are on like hella discounted sale right now because of the game. Fallout 76 is still free, and despite the fact that Gabe is saying, let's not talk about the online game, it's kind of crap. Yes, when the game launched, it was kind of crap. If you start the game right now, it's kind of great because Bethesda fixed it. They made an online MMO Fallout game, and everything that they said wasn't going to be included and why people were mad about it, they added, and now it's a great game. So they fixed it. Start it, play it, have fun with it, because that is technically the first game in the Fallout canon timeline. So play that one. Just get used to making your own character, going out in the wasteland, doing your thing, and then it's over. But
we shouldn't do it here because the audience is talking. I would like the audience to watch this so that they can join us. I would like to talk about the entire thing in its entirety. I don't think here is the right place to do it. I think we do it as a recorded show.
Yeah, but a separate episode just for that.
Yeah, I was, and maybe even bring out, if you know any Fallout purists, maybe we can find out what their gripes with it is. As an individual that was aware of my friends playing Fallout while I was playing another video game, because that's how we rolled in the 90s.
You mean Danny when he played Fallout on the computer and we would just be like, no, we're doing something.
We went to Danny. Well, we also went to Danny's cousin's house one summer, and they were in Nevada. They were right outside of Vegas, and he was playing that. And I don't know. I was watching TV because I was addicted to TV because I'm still addicted to TV. I love television.
Well, we can also thank your dad for not giving you TV and causing you to be at my house every day.
Listen, I am like a moth to a Mormon flame when I see a television set. Whatever you got, I'm ready for it.
TV.
But Danny played a bunch of the old Fallout, and just being aware of it, I was still very happy with the show. Very happy. Oh, okay. I do have a gripe, though.
Give me the gripe. Gripe.
This is a real gripe, Taylor.
Okay.
Amazon Prime needs to have. How do I turn off where it tells me the actors' names?
Oh, you mean the The weird X-ray thing?
Taylor, it ruined one of the later episodes. It just says in the description, because it tells you everybody in the scene. I was like, I know who that person was, but you didn't have to spell it out. They're ruining plot beats of the Fallout show if you pause it at the wrong time. It just tells you character names.
Yeah. I'm reading that. I like this. Amazon gave us a sex scene without gratuitous nudity. They did.
Yeah, but it's still
an awkward situation because I was watching it with my son and he was like, "Oh," I'm like, "Close your eyes," and then I'm like, "Or not," because nothing's happening. I was like,
"It's Hollywood. We got to have a sex scene in the first episode. You got to know these characters are sexy."
One of the things I liked about Fallout was I basically described that this is kind of like 1950s and 60s satire, and like if you have RoboCop is peak 80s satire. Fallout is like, let's make fun of the boomer generation in every capacity we can, and they did such a great job at it.
But I got this argument with my wife. So let me just tell me if I'm right. So like our history, right? We made nuclear bombs, but instead of it like going like this through the 70s, it just went boop, and they started making everything, and then between 58 and 64, we blew up the whole Earth.
Yeah, basically. So like nuke bomb was invented, we won World War II, and then instead of like abandoning the technology, we just went nuts with it and said, what if we just nuclearized everything? And they just went a hardcore jump into light speed with technology ramping up because of nuclear power.
Was the end of World War II where they were using the mech suit, or was the Battle of Anchorage
of Anchorage
the Korean
kind of
War?
Like Vietnam or Korea War. Like
okay.
That's kind of where that is. Like we're going to fight Russia and we're going to fight them in Anchorage. And that's kind of how that went.
Walton Goggins gives.
Oh my God.
So he's kind of playing a caricature of himself, but he's so good at it.
So it was funny because I was watching it. Most of my complaints about Fallout was about his character. Not because he was bad at it, but it felt really one-dimensional until episode 8. And I'm like,
sure.
Oh my God, here it is.
Yeah.
Here's where he's important. So it was very interesting that it felt like they were almost wasting him, and like I'm like, okay, so he's playing himself, he's not doing much, okay, let's see how this goes. And then all of a sudden they're like, now here is all the meat to why this character is going to be very important going forward, and they hit you all at once with it. And I'm like, but what was fun about it was that they did it in a way that not only reaffirmed 99% of the fan theories about what the Fallout franchise was and who started the war, but they just tied it all together. And they're like,
again, we can't. I know, and we can't. We should have talked about it. We should let people watch it. I will let you know.
Everyone, just go watch it. It's amazing. Just go watch it.
I was really happy with it. I was happy that they didn't shy away from the ultra violence of it all. I like that.
No, they didn't.
It escalates very quickly. I also really enjoyed. There was a number of practical effects in the show.
Most of them were actually, which was really cool.
Yeah, and I just appreciated them building those sets, making all the jumpsuits, the Pit Boys, just all of it. I was just very happy with the aesthetic of the show.
It was a very fun show across the board. And like I said, it was very faithful to the original games, faithful to the source material. And it's why I think that in terms of adapting video games, in my mind, there's only been a handful of video game adaptations that really worked. The Super Mario movie was a good example of like the reason why it worked is because the people who made the games helped craft the story. They did the same thing here. But to me, despite the fact that The Last of Us had so much critical praise, it missed a lot of things and it cut out a lot of things. So my stance has always been to make a good video game adaptation, make an adaptation set in that universe. Don't try to adapt something that is currently playable, because the playable version will always be the bigger and more emotional and better version. Like, to me, the Pokemon Detective Pikachu game, didn't care for it, but I thought that the movie was done very well because it not only set itself in the Pokemon universe, but it also referenced the old games and the TV show. So they actually did a very good job in setting a story loosely based on an existing property, but telling its own story for justifying its existence. And that's what Fallout here did. They didn't adapt anything one-to-one. They didn't adapt anything for that matter. They just told a new story set in that universe, and it was just done very well.
I enjoyed it. I think it raised the bar in a really fun way. I think we haven't had a show like this in a while. I think it would have absolutely worked week to week. I think the upside is that I'm telling everyone to watch the show. You know what I mean? And hopefully then that spurs it on to hopefully continue with the season 2.
Yeah, because season 2 is set obviously in a very amazing.
But funny enough, Taylor, we're talking about Zack Snyder. This season, while a cohesive journey and very enjoyable, needs another 8 to 10 episodes to finish its story.
Yeah.
And now we're talking about things in a much larger time frame. And funny enough, I do feel that this will get another season, but I don't know if it needs 5 seasons to tell its story. You know what I mean?
What's interesting about this is kind of going back into this. So I talked to a handful of people who saw Rebel Moon Part 2, and everyone said kind of the same thing. If you didn't like the first one, you'll like the second one because it does a lot better justifying its existence than the first one did, which is obviously the second half of a bigger movie. But what is interesting about this was that the entire Fallout show was actually cheaper to make than Rebel Moon's Part 1 and 2, which I thought was interesting. But this also then jumps into what we're talking about, what's going on right now with Netflix. Netflix hired Dan Lin to run everything, essentially. He is the new Kevin Feige of Netflix, right? And earlier this week, an article dropped from New York Times where they basically said that Netflix is moving forward with a brand new strategy, and essentially they're going to be moving forward with what's called an audience over auteur direction. They want to improve the quality and produce a wider spectrum of films, not just continue to make expensive action movies with very little impact. And that's a very interesting stance to take because Netflix has been hurting, and that's no secret.
But they've also made 5 action movies, and I only watched, I think, one of them. I didn't watch the Charlize Theron one. Like, I can name to you, I watched The Gray Man. I know I liked that one, but there was a bunch of other ones I didn't watch.
Right. And so what they're basically saying is that they're going to stop taking these big risks on these big, expensive projects. Like Damsel, for instance, was a very expensive film that was critically wrecked.
There's a meme online when you find out that the thing you really enjoyed was destroyed by critics. I thought Damsel was a wonderful dragon movie. I am a dragon movie fan. Going back to Dragonheart, I liked this movie. It felt like a video game, and it felt like a better video game than other video game movies.
Right. And so, I mean, you can also argue the same thing that's happened with Rebel Moon's Part 1 and 2, is that it cost Netflix about $170 million to make this 4-hour-long movie, and they are going to triple dip again and later this summer release a 6-hour-long director's cut of it. But what the mandate is saying behind the scenes, what I've been hearing behind the scenes, is essentially that Netflix is trying to cut out excessive spending across the board. If any project is going to exceed $100 million, and that includes with marketing, with merchandise, any of that stuff, if that movie is going to cost that much money, it has to be a proven success. So
does this hurt Stranger Things?
No, because Stranger Things is wrapping up its final season, and they already know that it's going to make its money back because it's Stranger Things. But if you look at the escalation of how Stranger Things went, that's the kind of model they're going to do. How much did the first season of Stranger Things cost, Michael?
What? Okay, it came out like 10 years ago, right? Like it came out a decade ago?
Ish, right?
2015?
So the entire...
It's before Trump.
Right, it was way before that. I mean, the kid is now like 18 or 19.
Okay.
And he was like 7 when they made the first season, right? Like it's a long time ago.
They did the first season for $30 million.
About that, right? So whole seasons...
God fucking dog!
That's about how much it costs, right? So the first season was fairly cheap for an entire season with that kind of a thing. They bumped it up. I think the word was that the first season was $6 million per episode, give or take, in that ballpark. which more or less is like, it's kind of around 30 million. I mean,
Okay.
they say it's about 6 million, but it was a lot less in some aspects. Second season was closer to 8 million an episode, so they bumped it up a little bit. Season 3 and 4 took a big jump to it. But now season 5, the last season, is going to be another big jump. But they've also proven that every season has more viewers than the last.
That
So
show is so good. Every season, of course, it's got to get better. They do bigger. They go deeper into the upside down.
But that's the thing, is that each of these seasons have also been successful, but there's actually marketing and merchandise that does also sell too. And on the flip side, the Rebel Moon verse has been 166 million, I think, for these two films. They filmed it back to back, so they bumped out that cost up front. They also paid for a tabletop game, a video game, a tie-in comic, random posters, random action figures, and random like popcorn buckets you could find at Walmart, just random merch across the board. They canceled the tabletop game, so they paid for that and killed it. Sounds like the video game may also be in trouble too. Which sucks.
Why make the tabletop game when they kill it? Because they don't want to ship it?
It just didn't work out. They weren't happy with the product, and they just like, no, this isn't going to work. And that's kind of the issue, is that yes, it cost 166 million to make the film, but they spent about that on top of it to do all this extra stuff. And the reality is that Netflix is trying to get away from that kind of excessive spending, because they're not putting movies out in theaters and they're not putting movies in home release. So they're not getting they're not getting that money back unless it's for merchandise. And if the merchandise isn't selling, the excessive spending has to also be cut somewhere else.
Now, I understand that part of it. Is this also them kind of smelling blood in the water? Because
Maybe.
all of these other studios are hurting, and I don't see Paramount or Warner Brothers being able to put up anywhere close to that amount of money for a Rebel Moon-like project. I mean, their Rebel Moon-like project is James Gunn. Like, that's the project. That's what we're doing. And I don't think there's anybody at Paramount, and Warner Brothers stole Tom Cruise away. So
they lost their golden goose because there's so many things behind the scenes that that Warner Brothers came in to buy Paramount, talked to their bankers, made the paperwork work. They got Tom Cruise out of the deal to kind of sweeten the deal, to convince it would be a good idea. Something happened that Warner Brothers was like, we don't want you guys, and they backed out. So I don't know. Maybe Paramount's in a worse spot than most people think, because if Warner Brothers was already in a deficit, willing to buy them, and then walked away, that's not good.
Funny enough, we're talking studios now, and I was thinking about the Fallout show. I feel like there's like 3 or 4. There's been like 3 MGM things I've seen, and I was like, wow, they're making some good content, up until they went belly up and Amazon bought them. But I was like, what else has been under that umbrella?
But MGM is now part of Amazon, so everything that MGM is making now is straight up Amazon. Amazon's using their studio infrastructure to make bigger things, which is still pretty cool in itself. I still hate the idea of corporations buying movie studios and making it more of a corporate thing, but here we go.
Well, now you're talking Fallout, Taylor, because that's what we're talking about here. And unfortunately, I feel like that is the weirdness that we're in. It feels like there will be another consolidation because these companies were too big for their britches and try to compete in the tech space instead of the movie theaters. I can't believe how bad this year is for movies.
Yeah.
My mom dragged me to the theater. I saw Dune 2, which...
Why did you get dragged to see Dune 2? You don't drag anyone to see it. You just see it because it's amazing. What's wrong with you?
That's exactly what I thought when I was watching it. But there was a handful of people in the theater. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it's not
the
like...
movie still made a butt ton of money, and it's actually on digital release now. So it made its money back. It doesn't need to be in the theaters to make its money back.
I'm just telling you, it was a continuation story, much like Fallout will be one. I mean, the movie told its story, but it needed 2 full parts, and it just felt like the continuation. And I did like it more than part 1 because more happened. They didn't have to teach the world.
So going forward, like I said, that they're going to be cutting down on how much they spend in these projects. And I was actually talking to someone at length earlier about this because I made the comment about this a few days ago when Dan Lin, and I was like, honestly, it sounds like they may be inching away from these big auteur directors, because that's exactly what's happening, is that they're not trying to make projects that will appeal to a niche audience. They're trying to make projects that almost not so much a guaranteed success, but something that will justify the spending. Like, okay, if we're going to make Happy Gilmore 2, we need to justify spending $25 million on this. Is there at least enough people to want to see this movie? The answer is yes. So that's why they're doing it. But they're doing stuff like that where they're like,
Taylor, it's crazy they're making content for us now. It's crazy that they're just coming out with this nostalgia remember berries. Like, all of this stuff. When you kids are out there going, who's watching this shit? It's me and Taylor, and we're showing it to our children.
Yeah. I was trying to clean up my camera. It looked a little mudgy. But Netflix has had this weird dynamic where they can't retain subscribers, and they have this kind of roller coaster of events. And you could argue that yes, Rebel Moon caused an influx of subscribers, but at the end, after Rebel Moon released, they actually lost a lot of subscribers too. So they saw that people literally subscribed for it and then left again. And
they're going to come back.
And they're going to come back again for the part 2 that comes out tomorrow. Then they're going to leave again. They're going to come back in July when the next part's released, and then they're going to do that. But what they found is that it's actually cheaper for them to license content from other studios. Like, okay, we want that TV show, and we're going to pay for it, and it's cheaper for them to do that than it is to make their own product.
Yeah, they got a ton of the Universal stuff, and I feel like they got a ton of the like the Warner Brothers stuff, right?
Yeah,
Aquaman with stuff, all the like their whole DC stuff just all showed up on Netflix.
Yeah, they licensed it for like 6 weeks, had a huge surge of numbers from it, and then that was it. And they were like, wow, that was actually a success. So they find that is actually going to work for them. So that's why they're going to be spending less money on things like Rebel Moon Part 5 or 6, and they're going to spend like, okay, for one Rebel Moon, we could buy these 25 shows.
I'm a content junkie, so I watch everything on its original platform. If you only have Netflix, go watch Killing Eve. It's a fantastic show, and there's going to be people in the Netflix-only universe that are going to get to discover that show, and I'm excited for it.
What's going to basically come down to is that projects are going to be put out in a way that justifies their costs. So if Rebel Moon Part 3 does happen, it will only be greenlit as one film at a time to keep the budget down. And if you want Part 4, you have to watch Part 3. They're not going to justify saying, here we're going to spend more than our budget mandate, and we're going to greenlight 3 films. They're going to say, you've got $80 million to make this. If you can't do it for 80, that's it.
I think Zack Snyder needs to get his budget ripped from him. One of his best movies, 300, he said he used every lick of film, everything he shot is in that movie. I think he does well under the pressure, and I think he's got a good enough, he's got a big enough roster of actors that really like working with them that I think they'll take the pay cut to be a part of something.
And the thing is, if you look at it this way, all right, when did 300 come out? Right, 2006, I think.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we were still in San Diego. It was San Diego, right? We saw it at if not Krikorian, we saw it at the beach.
Yeah, so it came out like 2006, and it was made for $60 million. Zach had proven very easily that if you give him a locked, tiny budget and a big enough dream, he has the heart to make that dream come true.
Taylor, finish this. Let's do a hard aside and tell the audience about the movie theaters. There are 3 movie theaters that come to mind for Taylor and I when we talk about the movie theaters. One, there was a movie theater kind of by our house, but it wasn't very good.
It was at one point it was called like the Nickelodeon or something like that.
That's what it was good.
And then they bought it, and did AMC buy it, or was it Regal who bought it? And then it became like they expanded it, and it was kind of
Yeah, it was real mid. And our friend worked there, and we just found out
free all the time.
Yeah, it was super dirty. It was a dirty theater.
Yeah.
Then they built a good theater down by Oceanside Beach in the downtown area.
That was the Regal. That was always there.
I remember that one being brand new. I feel like that whole shopping center opened up and it was great. And then the third movie theater was in
to that
Vista.
one all the time because our comic book shop is right next door to it. So we buy comics, go to a movie, come back and look at comics again. I think that comic book shop closed
House
like
of
a decade ago.
Yeah.
Because they tried to like keep relevant by opening up an internet cafe in there, and it just didn't work because it was too many technical issues to keep it afloat.
Just people looking at smutty pictures on computers. And then the
it
third
was
one,
literally a room of people all playing Counter-Strike all at once. That's all it was.
and then the third one they built by our high school. And that one was like, I mean, I feel like that is what movie theaters are now, right? They all look like that. They're megaplexes, big screens, huge lobby. We waited in line for all the Harry Potter movies there.
We did, didn't we? Yeah, that was the good. We liked that one. That was a good theater.
Oh, Taylor, we forgot about. So when we could drive, there was a theater that had bigger seats, and that was the San Marcos one, because I know we saw Lord of the Rings there.
Yeah, we did. And they also had the Regal that was connected to the mall that I think I saw maybe one or two. I saw the first Lord of the Rings there with Danny, and that was it. Like, that was the only time I went there. Oh, and we also saw Lady in the Water. That was that one.
Well, Danny's dad would always take you to M. Night Shyamalan movies. If you hang around along with Mr. Nicholas, you'll get to see an M. Night Shyamalan movie.
He loved those movies. And I was like, oh, this is okay. This is fine. I like one or two of his films, but...
The same summer of Fallout on the computer, we saw the Harrison Ford killing his wife, Michelle Pfeiffer.
What Lies Beneath, right? Yeah.
That was a great movie to see in a movie theater.
That movie was, it still kind of creeps me out. It's like not like a scary movie, but it's got like a creep factor to it, which is really cool.
He puts her in that bathtub. She's drowning.
Oh, that scene where she comes up and looks like a zombie for like half a second. That always made me jump.
I was trying to get the rain so I could do water coming up. I'll play with it later.
Yeah. Anyways, we're big enough tangent there. The problem that Netflix is now doing is that essentially they have to like lock in the budget on projects. And if they're going to make a project, they're not going to do the Zack Snyder approach where they say, let's make a shared universe right now. Because they did that with Army of the Dead, and they killed the prequel TV series, which they spent a shit ton of money on, and it's dead in the water now. And they haven't even done anything with the sequel that they promised us. And now they're talking about greenlighting Rebel Moons 3, 4, 5, but they're doing that in a way to hype up the release of number 2, which what they're doing. Like, they're obviously trying to see if this is popular enough, should we continue? Because Zack Snyder's contract is already over. He's already a pay-for-film deal with them going on. So we'll see what happens.
Will this hurt animation? I feel like animation is so expensive, and they've done these really great projects. Do you think this will affect them getting another... that League of Legends show? Do you think it'll affect them with the Cyberpunk? I mean, do you think it'll affect those projects going forward?
Maybe. Because the animated series of Arcane was 9 episodes, $10 million an episode. It's still under their $100 million budget. But they got a lot out of that show.
So expensive.
Very expensive animated show. But then you have, at the same time, what was the other show that you mentioned? You had Arcane and...
the other
you just said it and I just lost
the Cyberpunk show.
Oh, Cyberpunk. So that show is honestly Cyberpunk Edgerunners. That was the name of it.
They skimped on some stuff in that show.
But did they? It was so goddamn good.
It was great. I liked it. I liked it a lot. I just think that they did some fun animation tricks in that show.
But look at this. How much does Cyberpunk Edgerunners cost? About $3.5 million. They paid pennies compared to what they're doing for these other things. And that's why they found, and Netflix, Amazon, Warner Brothers, they're all finding the same thing. The yen goes a long way. So if you get the right studio and make a project like the new Suicide Squad Isekai show, that's a very cheap show that they made. The animation team is known for some great shit. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Netflix should do a deal with Toho.
They should.
And do Godzilla +9. Like, just whatever that next project is, get them and pay the $20 million, which is a steal, because the quality is so high.
But that's actually the trick. Because most people don't realize that Toho has locked themselves in with this weird contract with Legendary. So unless you get in bed with Legendary, you don't get Toho either. The reason why Godzilla Minus One is not on digital release in America or any sort of release in America is because they have this weird contract where when Toho makes a film, Warner Brothers and Legendary doesn't make a film. But when Warner Brothers and Legendary have a film, Toho cannot do anything in America with their films. So until Godzilla vs. Kong, The New Empire is done with its theatrical run and released on home video, then we'll get Godzilla Minus One afterwards. Because they basically have this weird lock. But Toho gets a good cut of the projects that they step aside for. So
I figured as much. You don't give Godzilla up and don't see a pretty penny for it.
They get a big pretty penny out of this. So they actually I think they actually made more money from their deal on Godzilla versus Kong than they made on Godzilla Minus One. But the quality of the two projects is like night and day. But like
there's always been good Godzilla movies and bad Godzilla movies, and they sometimes feel like they come at right after another. So nothing new here. This always feels like Godzilla.
So I mean, that's where like I said, going back to the Netflix side of things, the big question is what exactly is going to happen with their Zack Snyder stuff, because they're obviously hyping up more stuff to get people excited for part 2, and then you got the director's cuts that are coming out later this year.
2 movies in the animated series.
Yeah, so you have so much stuff that's coming out that they're just not going to allow in their budget anymore. So if we're going to get Rebel Moon Part 3, it will only be a 3rd film, and they're not going to allow Zack to film 3, 4, and 5 all at once. They're going to basically say, make it as contained as you can for the budget that you can, and if it's successful, you'll get another part. So there's a good chance that they will make Part 3, it won't be successful, and then you'll be left with another cliffhanger ending that's never going to see a resolution because they're not going to pay for it.
I don't feel like this affects One Piece live action season 2 or season 3, but as those actors get more hype and bring more to that show, I wonder if eventually they have to cap it and like, no, we can't go any higher or we don't make the show.
Yeah, it's going to definitely start happening, but from the internal chatter is that if the project has proven its worth, they are willing to be flexible in certain aspects, like they are with Stranger Things. So they're going to have small season 1 if it's successful, slightly bigger season 2 if successful, then they start escalating from there, like a reverse snowball effect. And that's how they're going to kind of do it.
Is Netflix at all involved with this? The One Piece anime where they're going to do like a OVA show. It'll be 25 episodes and it'll be like all the big highlights. It'll be 100.
The retelling of the original few seasons, but
like
the Dragon Ball Kai version of it, where it's skip through 8 seasons in 10 episodes.
And they're going to redraw it, which is pretty cool.
I think Netflix is in the running to have that access. It's either Netflix or Crunchyroll that are in a bidding war right now over it, but I think it's going to end up on both platforms in the end, in my opinion. But it's such an interesting thing because you have all these people saying, oh, Snyder's safe because of this, this, and this. But Netflix understands just as much as everyone else does that if a movie is critically wrecked, word of mouth does hurt a film. So,
well, and the opposite is true too. I mean, look at what's going on with Disney and X-Men 97. Which was kind of thought to be dead on arrival, and people didn't want to give it the time of day. And it turns out there's a huge market of adults that want good animated content. And I feel like Invincible and X-Men 97 are different ends of the spectrum, but both kind of feel that Saturday morning cartoon vibe, and they're just both killing it.
Yeah, so let's talk about this. All right, because X-Men 97 is the next topic on our show. And I wanted to talk at length about this last episode, episode 5, because episode 5 was essentially the Red Wedding if the show is being compared to Game of Thrones.
Wait a second. There was an episode today. You said I had to be current. I watched it this morning.
Well, I thought it came out like at 6. I haven't watched it yet. But that's still, it's beside the point. That episode is a continuation of another story that's from a few episodes ago, so it's still like they haven't revisited the aftermath of what happened on Genosha.
No, they haven't. And today's episode felt like a huge departure. We like caught up with some other characters. And it was like, let's go back to that Mutant 9/11 that just happened.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about what Bo DeMeo actually said about this, because Bo
Who's
DeMeo,
that?
he was the creator that was notoriously fired.
He got blown up in that episode.
He did. He had a cameo in this episode, right? What was interesting about what he said,
I recognized him. I didn't recognize him without a shirt on, but then I pictured what it would look like, and then I knew it was him.
And you knew it. Yeah. All right. So he actually went onto social media and basically said, this is what it is. And I'm going to pull up his exact tweet and just read it to you, because he didn't comment about anything other than straight up what was going on.
The story.
And, yeah, because he didn't want to like say, oh, I was fired for this. He just basically was like, episode 5 came out and I want to talk about this because it's a big deal for me. And his comments on episode 5 actually should be enough for some people to realize what he's actually doing. What this show actually did. Because a lot of people, as soon as the episode came out, they were like, oh, cable's going to fix it. Oh, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. They're going to retcon this. They're going to do this. Nope. Because what he did instead was, I'm just going to read it, because I think that's what people need to understand was what he did.
Did he explain why there won't be a Gambit in the MCU?
All right, here we go. A lot of questions, so I'll momentarily break silence to answer. Episode 5 was the centerpiece of my pitch to Marvel in November 2020. The idea being to have the X-Men mirror the journey that any of us who grew up in the original show have experienced since being kids in the 90s. The world was seemingly safer place for us, where a character like Storm would comment on how brown-skinned racism was quaint in one man's work. For the most part, to our young minds, the world was a simple place of right and wrong, where questions about identity and social justice had relatively clear-cut answers. Then 9/11 happened. The world turned against itself. Things weren't so safe anymore. Grassroots populist movements began to rise around the world as a whole nation struggled to deal with the collective trauma and fractured at the same of every diverse demographic. The effects we still feel today and have only exacerbated by more collective traumas like COVID and several recessions. For me personally, 9/11 was also when I came out of the closet to my family and realized that not everyone would accept me. It's when I entered college and noticed certain groups avoided me, or that Supercuts in Tallahassee refused to service me because they didn't do ethnic haircuts. Reality, as Jubilee found out in episode 4, got very real and very scary. This happened to many people. We had kids and got jobs with high stakes. Suddenly, it wasn't enough for us to survive. We had responsibilities, and people whose survival depended on us meeting those responsibilities. We were growing up. If you were like me, you would actually watch old episodes of the OG cartoon to comfort myself and take yourself back. God knows I did during COVID. But just like Roberto warned Jubilee, there's a danger of living in the past and clinging to nostalgia. There's a danger to not letting go of who we think we are, as Cyclops and Jean are learning. It leaves us stagnant and dangerously unaware of the future we didn't anticipate. Yes, it looked like Gambit's story was going a very specific direction. The crop top was chosen to make you love him. Him pulling off a shirt was intentional. And there was a reason he told Rogue any fool would suffer her hand in the dance, even if it ended up not being him suffering. But just like the events of 9/11, Tulsa or Charlottesville, or the Pulse nightclub, let me get to the next part because he has a second part. There's too many stories that are often cut far too short. I partied at Pulse. It was my club, and I have so many great memories of its awesome white lounge. It was, like Genosha, a safe place for me and everyone like me to dance and laugh and be free. I thought about this a lot when crafting this season and this episode, and how the gay community in Orlando rose to heal from the event. Like many of us who grew up in the OG cartoon, the X-Men have been hit hard by the realities of an adult life in an unsafe world. Life's happened to them, and they, like we did, will have to decide which parts of themselves they'll cling to and which parts they'll let go of in order to do what they've been telling humanity to do: face an uncertain truth that they never saw coming. As Trask told Cyclops in the premiere, you have no idea what it's like to be left behind by the future. Now the X-Men do. And like each of us, they'll have to weigh whether or not this is the time for social justice, or as Magneto preached at his trial, it is the time for social healing. So if you actually listen to what the creator of the show said, all of this shit was meant to be permanent. All of this shit was meant to be just as horrific and terrible as exactly as we knew it was. So characters that died on screen are meant to be dead and stay dead.
Will they stay dead?
But that's the thing. So the show was wrapped up in a way. I mean, they finished the show before they ended up firing him. But the reality is, everything that he had crafted was meant to be exactly that. These are going to be the traumas that are going to mold these characters going forward. The loss of a leader, the loss of a friend, the loss of a lover, the loss of everybody. All of these things are what's going to be molding the X-Men into what they were in the original show to what they're going to be at the end of the season.
It's really funny that you brought up the Red Wedding, because now, as the audience, nobody is safe.
Nobody is safe.
Nobody. Oh well, Wolverine is safe, but that's part of the tragedy. And I'm going to let you know, I am surprised that we have not had a Wolverine episode yet. Which I want to let you know
we're going to.
I know, but that's
they showed us a preview, and we already know there's going to be a big old flashback episode with Wolverine and his World War II antics.
Listen, I know that we're no longer the 90s, because I feel like every episode would be about Wolverine if we were the 90s again. I feel like we've done nothing with Wolverine yet.
Yeah. Wolverine was the centerpiece of the original show, and he's been on the back burner this entire season.
It speaks to the thought process that they brought to this, and I'm very happy that he was able to express like those real life events, and then being able to think about it in a fictional world, because it is affecting these, and it will affect them that way. Just like, we've all lived through traumas, and we then deal with those traumas. Yeah. So we're now seeing, and we, the audience, have now been traumatized by this. I hope that they can stay the course. That being said, this is comic books, baby. We kill people and bring them back and turn them into lightning people and bring them through a portal. I mean, how many times has Magneto died? Now, listen, maybe he's dead, and I like that we can live in that world, but like, it's comics, baby. We can go to another universe. They got one right over there.
So, I mean, just because they killed off one version of the character doesn't mean there's a multiverse of other versions. I do get that, but the reality is that going forward, the show, they may be pulling some details from some of the comic stuff. I mean, Magneto could be dead and come back as Zorn just as much as the comics had Magneto die in the raid of Genosha and then pretend to be dead for years while he pretended to be another character.
There is, in addition to like science fiction magic, there is real kind of weird mutant magic, and who knows where it will go. Listen,
I mean, the fact that also you can also argue that the Sentinels were killing an Omega level mutant, and then they left when the mutant's Omega level signature was gone, which they assumed, oh, he's dead, while Magneto was also being strangled by Leech, the character who sucks powers away. So if the Sentinel cannot read him anymore, maybe they just said, oh, we just killed nothing because he's not there no more. So you can justify it all you want.
Love where your brain's at. Love that you're getting real deep into this.
But on the same token, our Cajun boy, that's it.
I also think there's too many cooks in the kitchen. I think that they're really trying to escalate Cyclops, and I think the way you got to do that is you got to get rid of Gambit, and you got to know, like, nah, we're not following these characters the way that we used to.
Yeah, we're basically going to make these characters go through some trauma like we did as kids.
I also, okay, so now that we're talking about this, and it was funny because when you were talking about this, I just thought, like, we've always seen the character Rogue in the cartoon holding back because she can't go too far. She lost both of the men that she loves.
And she has lost her collective shit. She is going to go full Dark Phoenix for this show.
I wonder if we see her just choke out Laser Man, and then all of a sudden she's got laser eyes, Taylor, because that's what happens when she doesn't let go. And she's going to be so crazy angry.
Yeah, I could see Rogue just be like, I'm going to find the next motherfucker who's in my way, and I'm going to strangle the life out of him like I did Miss Marvel.
And
and she's just gonna go nuts because we see she's gonna go full on any character in Game of Thrones who lost their shit like that. I mean, there's so many characters to pick from.
I was watching internet videos about Gambit and how Sinister altered his brain so that he wouldn't be too crazy powerful because another version of him ruined the future and he doesn't want to be that guy. That could have very well be a Sinister clone. Now, it's not a clone, everybody. He's dead, but like Sinister is cloning people left and right, and Scott Summers couldn't tell the difference. Was having a psychic is still having a psychic. How often do you talk to her on the astral plane, you son of a bitch?
Like a month now. You were cheating on me with me for a month.
I just check in on her. Gene, it's a thing we do.
Yeah, I was watching that. I'm like, damn. I don't know how my wife would feel if I was cheating on my wife with the clone of my wife. I think she'd be like, I get it, but
it's that movie. It's that movie that the Duffy brothers wrote, right?
Yeah, so I don't know. There's so many things that I was just like watching them, like, oh, Cyclops, you messed up. Shit.
I like it. I also like that because everyone was basically every week they were watching the episodes and saying, this is this episode, this is this comic book, this is this comic book. That's still going on, but like this is the comic book series they killed off Gambit, and I don't know if we've seen that comic book yet.
Are we ready for that? I mean, they pulled some major shit in this last, like whenever I was watching it, I was like, oh, as soon as I saw that scene, and I want to talk about it explicitly.
Yo, this show also draws. Invincible made a joke about how some scenes are drawn better. This show, all of the Sentinel Destroyer stuff was so well animated. It was so cinematic. And then some scenes they like sit around a table and chit chat.
I want to point out because so when I was watching it, this when Rogue and Gambit were having their like, maybe this isn't going to work, and then you see her pan up and you see the Watcher in the sky. The moment I saw the Watcher, I was like, oh my god, this is going to go so bad. He doesn't care about their relationship drama. Someone's going to die right now because the Watcher doesn't show up for anything.
I'm excited to talk more about it. I also think that Gambit had to die so that Sunspot could run. I feel like you can't they kind of do something similar. And now Sunspot needs to toy up so we can see what he looks like.
I don't know, man. I was just like, oh my god, they did this. This is insane. I had so many like holy crap moments in that episode. And I even showed it to my son. I'm like, Brian, sit down and watch this. And he's like, why? I'm like, just watch it. And I made him watch that episode, and he's like, this is nothing. Oh my god. Like he was like, I get it now. I see why the show was so insane for you. Because like that. Like just that. Like holy crap. They made the show worth it in one episode. Like there it is. That was so rough to watch.
Listen, it's going to be real sad. I wonder people are going to be coming home. I wonder what X-Men around the world decide to pop back in because they're really resonated. They're thinking about this. It's exciting.
Well, because there's been this ongoing rumor that the show is going to end in a way that the X-Men have to reorganize themselves, and they're going to have new costumes. It's going to be like how it was in the 90s, and the transition from like the colorful X-Men that we got in the 90s era to like the early 2000s Grant Morrison X-Men, where everyone was wearing black with the big yellow X's and all that stuff. Like they're going to have a kind of a team uniform going forward when they restructure themselves. And I'm very curious to see what's going to happen with this team and who exactly is on this roster by the time the dust settles. Because that some people are going to die.
Yes, and if you're doing it by, I feel like they're going to kill Rogue. I think Rogue is way too powerful, and she is identified with those with the Fox movies. I feel like Rogue has got to go. Storm stays, Cyclops stays, and then Wolverine stays. Maybe
Wolverine's going to stay on everything. They're going to do what they did in the early 2000s. Put Wolverine on 25 different shows, and he's going to be he doesn't sleep because he's always there.
Let's go, Hugh Jackman. I'm ready for it. And then also, I could also see Morph not making it over to real life. I feel like that's such a powerful. Like the upside of Morph is you get to do cameos, but like I don't know if he's gonna. Who would he turn? You know, is he's gonna turn into Tony Stark? He can't turn. Can Morph turn into an Iron Man or just mutants?
I don't know.
I
I have
don't
so many
know.
questions because they made Morph so much more powerful in the show than he's ever has been. So
When he turns into another mutant, he gets access to their abilities.
it
That's
kind of seems that way, right? So I don't know what they're hinting at, but maybe Morph just got very OP when his torture from Mr. Sinister. So
and if that's also the case, it also means Gambit's not really gone and Magneto's not really gone. Now
yeah,
they're gone, but they're not gone.
yeah, they can come back at any time, and he can just be Morph there. But so as we wrap up, because we are wrapping up close
You
to
have
an
to do.
hour.
You got to tell your super. Listen, I apologize, people. That about Superman has not bit me. The Superman bug has not bit me yet. Taylor, what's the Superman news?
Mock the Kents. So there has been from Humberto Gonzalez over at the Wrap. He dropped exclusively the last 2 days that the Kents have been cast, and while it seems very like, okay, we'll wait till James Gunn comments on this because Humberto Gonzalez has a track record of being right a lot, but also not with James Gunn's arena. It's very possible that he could be wrong on this, but the 2 cast members that he announced was Jonathan and Martha Kent. And the implication of the casting is that both of them are alive. So, unlike in previous Superman stories where the Papa Kent is dead, he may actually be alive in this film. So, I mean, James Gunn, I think, said somewhere a few times that there's going to be no flashbacks in this movie, and it's going to just tell the story as it is. So, if he's casting the Kents, then they may both be alive.
You got to keep him alive because then he can go home and talk to Dad, and he can be like, "Listen, this is just like I told you in 2012."
What's interesting about this casting in particular is that they do seem older. They seem very much inspired by the Silver Age, Jonathan Martha, which is who I put in the picture there. Because a lot of people have this image of the Kents where from like the original show or Smallville, where you had like an old member of the Dukes of Hazzard as Jonathan Kent, where you're like, or even Man of Steel, where it was Kevin Costner, right? Where you're like, oh wow, so the Kents they're young, they're in shape, here we go. But modern day farmers don't tend to be lean cut guys. Like they're on tractors all day. They're kind of gaining some weight because their job went from being one thing to now being almost sedentary. So you have a very different view of how farming is in a realistic sense. So to me, this cast is actually pretty on the nose for a very legitimate modern day Kansas farmer would be. And the actors that they got here allegedly again, most people know who these people are, but don't know where they know them from. And that's always such a funny thing is that when you get these great castings and you're like, who is that?
Yeah, that guy on the right, I've seen in a million things, and I can't.
Right.
He plays weird bad guys and stuff like that. But I'm trying to think when I last saw him.
All right, so his name is Pruitt Taylor Vince. When I saw the announcement, I immediately remembered his character from Constantine from 05.
That's what I'm thinking of, Taylor.
Yep. And then he was also in The Walking Dead. So that was another big one where he kind of proved his acting chops. He is a fantastic actor and a very different take on Pa Kent. And the closest take that I can describe reminded me a lot of the Lois and Clark from when we were kids, the Superman TV show, where Superman's dad was alive, but he was a little older and a little bit more rounded out, you could say. He was a little bit more like a modern day farmer.
I think they're going to make both. I think we're going to see Pa Kent, and he's working. He's forced to work because of this economy, but like he should have retired 3 years ago. And Superman's going to be like, "Dad, retire. You don't need to work anymore."
It's like, I'm sending you guys money home, and he's like, I've lived on this farm my whole life. I will live I'll work until I die. Like that's the kind of mentality that I see him doing.
Yeah.
And then Mama Kent is being played by actress Neva Howell. So she is a relatively unknown actress, I guess you could argue. She has been known for certain projects here and there. I remembered her from a lot of 90s projects. October Sky, My Fellow Americans with I mean, you know that movie, right? She was also in, I guess, the more recent movie that I saw her in was that Logan Lucky, that basically Ocean's 11 for Daytona.
I did not see Logan Lucky.
You need to watch it. I watched it with my wife, and it's such a weird ass movie that it was so goddamn funny.
Where do I watch Logan Lucky?
I think I saw it on Netflix, but I don't know where it's at currently.
Okay,
But
I'll look for it.
she was just a very brief scene, nothing too exciting.
Sure.
But that movie, having the casting for Logan Lucky was just so damn good. You had Channing Tatum, you had Adam Driver and Daniel Craig all playing brothers, so they all had the same Southern accent. And Daniel Craig played such a great character in that film.
He likes playing characters.
He is so good at it. But anyways, they're both relatively. It's one of those things like it reminds me a lot of how Chris Nolan or Zack Snyder do their casting, where they find these diamonds in like these relatively unknown diamonds who've done a ton of things, right? So like when you see them, you're like, oh, I recognize that, but they're not like Tom Cruise. They're like, oh, that's an amazing actor who hasn't gotten the light of day that everyone needs to see. Or even like when Gwyneth Paltrow was cast in Iron Man, everyone knew who she was, but she had never done a big film before. She did a lot of indie films. So these kind of castings that we're getting with the Superman movie is a lot of that, with these amazing overlooked film actors, amazing TV actors that are all being brought into this space.
And I think you just hit the nose on the head there. I think that he's not just casting for this movie. He's casting for this universe. And I don't think there's going to be a Superman TV show. I don't think there needs to be. But if Ma Kent and Pa Kent want to go to Star City on vacation, we have somebody that can do that.
Yeah.
And I think that that's also a part of this as well.
So I think it's a very interesting place that they can do something like this, where James Gunn is, I mean, like I said, if this casting is real, because again, the only trade that confirmed it was The Wrap. And The Wrap has had a history of not being Variety or Deadline. So it's fully possible that it may not happen. But I have seen a lot of people come out of the woodwork that actually know these people, congratulating them on it. So it sounds like it's real. So
well, then I think that's where we wrap it up as well.
But before I did that, I wanted to show this one last thing, because this is they're right now in the middle of a pause on filming. They did a good chunk of their filming. Superman is taking a brief pause, and here's another picture I want to show you real fast before I close up, everybody. When people say, "Oh, this guy doesn't look like Pa Kent," let's look at this photo of the actor who 100% looks like Pa Kent in that photo.
Yeah, that's not too far from the other guy.
I'm just like, okay, yeah, I'm sold. Let's do this. Give him the wig, shave off the beard, give him the overalls and the glasses, and he's Pa Kent from the Silver Age.
100%.
When I say the Silver Age Pa Kent, the actual same comic that James Gunn loves is the same comic that Zack Snyder based Man of Steel on. So that's the Pa Kent that they took inspiration from. So yeah, I'm down with this casting 100%. But there was I forgot what I was about to say. Before I wrapped up, I was going to show you one more thing.
What else did you prepare? What else did you have in your bag of tricks?
Let me see. I mean, it was a photo that I took.
Is it Keanu Reeves as Shadow the Hedgehog?
No, I'm actually really jazzed about that. That actually sounds ridiculously fun to me. I mean, we already have the news that G.I. Joe versus Transformers is coming out, which is really cool.
Yeah, they set that up at the end of the last movie.
Yeah, Peacemaker Season 2 is currently filming its first episode, so that James Gunn ran over to go film that while they're on their break.
That makes sense.
David Corenswet was filming a commercial in Mexico, and this guy came out, took some photos of him, and was like, "Oh my god, I'm so glad I met Henry Cavill." And it was really funny that he like didn't know that it wasn't Henry, because he thought it was. Right, but here, let me pull up the images that this guy took while they were doing it, because it actually shows us essentially what we're probably going to get with David as his Clark Kent. Let me just grab the photo. There we go. So
Taylor, if people can't recognize, like, as if the general movie audience sees them as the same person, amazing.
Right, so I see this photo, and yeah, he does have this nice this Henry Cavill vibe to him. But there was all these rumors about, oh, David's wearing a beanie because he's got the Superman mullet. And I see this, I'm like, okay, his hair is black, and he looks like Christopher Reeve without the spit curl. Like,
Also, can everyone just appreciate the way that things get made? Look how pretty that man is, and then look at the ragtag rat people all around him making sure they get this shot. Like, is that not the most Hollywood thing?
yeah, I mean, like this shot on this my left, I guess the audience, would it be on there? I don't know, whichever direction I'm looking at, of him holding this giant ball.
Yeah.
He's got some pretty good arms. I mean, everyone who was like, oh my God, he's not going to be big enough to be Superman.
No, he's pretty big.
He's got the arms. We'll see it. I mean, even if they add the muscle suit underneath, he's got the base for a pretty big Superman. So we're good.
Fine
Right?
with me.
But I mean, the actor is pretty tall. He's got the build already. And I think that if they do the muscle suit approach that they've done with every superhero movie of all time, we're fine.
Those legs are crazy. Look at those boys. Look at those little those muscle. Look at the guy on the right with his chicken legs, and then look at those meaty KFC legs on that dude.
I think it's funny because people are like, oh, his legs don't look that big. I'm like, but if you look at him compared to a normal dude next to him, yeah, they're pretty big.
I mean, I guess he's a skinny dude. I guess whatever.
Or maybe he's like an average person. That's the base for the litmus test here.
Listen, our audience, we know what our audience wanted. They want us to talk about that man's body in depth, about his chiseled abs.
And they want Michael to objectify Superman all they want and question your sexuality a bit. So it's all right. But I mean, we've got our first look at Clark Kent not on a Superman set, which was pretty funny. We'll see what happens in the coming weeks, because it sounds like James Gunn is preparing to release a photo of Superman in the costume within the next X amount of weeks. So we're probably going to get a picture of him in suit very soon.
They should do Superman eating dinner with Ma and Pa Kent, and Superman's cutting up a turkey, and they're all like smiling.
That would be the best way just to show it off. Like, here's just some random behind the scenes photo that we're gonna shape up a little bit to make it just like this funny meta kind of a thing.
We'll see. And when it comes, we will tell you all about it here at the Cultured Nerd Podcast, brought to you by all of our wonderful patrons. Patrons. If you would, the website's patreon.com/theculturednerd. But you are wonderful patrons. Here they are. Thank you so much for all of your support. Thank you for helping pay all of our internet bills and things like that to bring you this fine show. Your host is Taylor Murphy. Your co-host is me, Michael Santel. Our logo was by Jose Navarro, and our intro was by Taylor Murphy and Jay Stu. If you're hitting up the interwebs and you're on the YouTubes, like, comment, subscribe. Who do you want to be mod podcast? If we're not going to get those two, and we're not going to get Diane Lane and Kevin Costner, who do you want to see? Let us know. And then also, what are your plots for Transformers versus G.I. Joe? And does The Rock come back? Put it below. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see all you kids and cats next time.
I don't know. I don't know if I want The Rock back in G.I. Joe. I mean, I liked that movie better than the first one, but I kind of want a G.I. Joe reboot in the Transformers reboot.
I bet they get Bruce Willis to give a thumbs up and a nice jacket.
I don't know. Well, I don't know.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Bye, Taylor.
Are we going to do the thing again where we try to cut